Let's talk about money. And I don't just mean the paper and coins in your wallet. Money is one of the most powerful ideas humanity has ever cooked up. It's this incredible system of trust that literally builds the world around us. So let's unpack that. Let's get into the real story of money. To really get why money is such a game changer, we have to go back to a time before it even existed. Before money, there was just bartering. If you wanted something, you had to find a way to trade for it directly. It sounds completely ridiculous, right? But this example really gets to the heart of the problem. Okay, imagine you're a cattle rancher, but what you really want is a bunch of bananas. You can't just run to the store. No, you have to track down someone who not only has bananas, but who also happens to want a whole cow right then and there. You can see how this gets complicated really, really fast. So this whole mess basically breaks down into three huge problems. First up, transferability. Your cow is totally useless if the banana farmer is actually looking for potatoes. Then there's divisibility. I mean, how do you even calculate how many bananas one cow is worth? And you can't exactly ask for change. You can't just hand over a leg. The whole thing is just incredibly clunky and inefficient. So humanity needed a better way, right? And out of all that chaotic trading came this truly ingenious solution, the idea of money itself. Not just a thing, but a concept that everyone could finally agree on. And this is the absolute key right here. Money only works because we, as a society, agree that it has value. It's basically a social contract. It's this shared belief that lets us use a symbol, whether it's a seashell or a number on a screen, to represent value. And that makes everything so much simpler. Now, over time, money has kind of shown up in two main flavors. First, you had commodity money. This is stuff that has value all on its own. Think precious metals like gold, or even beaver pelts, which were actually used as currency by American colonists. They were useful. But, as economies got bigger, you couldn't always find enough gold. And that's where fiat money comes in, like the US dollar. The paper it's printed on isn't worth much, but we accept its value because we trust the government that issues it. Okay, so that brings us to today. How does this whole idea of trust and supply actually work in our modern world? I mean, how do we even count all this money, let alone manage it? Well, economists have a clever way of measuring it, kind of like those Russian nesting dolls. The smallest doll is called M1. That's the money you can get your hands on right now. The cash in your pocket, your checking account, it's liquid. The next doll up is M2. It includes everything in M1 plus things like your savings accounts. And then you have M3, the biggest doll, which is all of that plus the huge sums of money moving around in big financial institutions. So who's in the driver's seat for all of this in the United States? Well, that would be the Federal Reserve, or as you probably hear it called, the Fed. And for the most part, it has two main levers it can pull to steer the economy. Think of it like a car. The Fed has a gas pedal and a brake. If the economy is sluggish, they hit the gas. They buy up government securities to pump more money into the system and lower interest rates to encourage everyone to borrow and spend. But if the economy is overheating and inflation is taking off, they hit the brakes. They do the exact opposite, sell securities to pull money out and raise interest rates to cool things down. And this is where it gets a little wild. The source material puts it perfectly. The central bank just creates the money. They don't have to fire up a giant printing press. They just digitally add dollars to an account. It's kind of mind-blowing, and it really shows you how much modern money is just an abstract idea, a system built entirely on that foundation of trust.
Now, you have to understand, this system we have now, it didn't just pop into existence. The way America deals with its money is the result of centuries of trial, error, and even a few outright rebellions.
The story really kicks off way back in the 1650s, when colonists defied Britain to make their own coins. Then, during the Revolution, the U.S. printed a currency called the Continental, which quickly became worthless from inflation. The Civil War gave us greenbacks. It really wasn't until 1913 that the Federal Reserve was created to try and bring some stability to the whole thing. And then, in 1971, a massive shift. America went off the gold standard. From that moment on, the dollar's value wasn't tied to a pile of gold anymore, but to the faith the world had in the U.S. economy. And speaking of history, here's a really cool little tidbit. Ever heard someone call a quarter 2 bits? Well, that phrase comes from a time when colonists had to literally make their own small change. They would take these big Spanish silver dollars and hack them into 8 wedge-shaped pieces, or pits. 2 of those bits made up a quarter of the coin. Pretty clever, right? So, okay, that's a lot of history and theory, but why should you actually care about any of this? Why does the story of money matter to you today, right now? Well, because it has a direct impact on your life and your wallet. Look, it all comes down to this. The value of the money sitting in your bank account, what we call your purchasing power, is tied directly to how well the economy is doing and the decisions being made by the Fed. When there's too much money floating around, you get inflation, which means your dollar just doesn't buy as much as it did yesterday. It all comes back to that central idea that the whole system only works because we all believe it does. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. This entire, massive, global financial system is built on that shared belief, that collective trust in the value of our money. So, what happens when that trust gets shaken? It's definitely something worth thinking about.